If you look at this area of Murfreesboro on a map today, it's hard to imagine what used to be here before university buildings, medical offices, cars passing through without a second thought. But much for the 20th century, this land was home to a place many locals still remember as the Louisa School. I'm Barbie with NightSong Paranormal, and this is part of a series exploring long-forgotten buildings and the difficult histories tied to them. The story begins in 1911 when a woman named Cora Bristol Nelson opened a private residential school here for what historical records referred to as afflicted children. That was the language of the time for children with developmental and intellectual disabilities. The school was originally known as the Bristol Nelson Psychological School, sometimes called Miss Nelson's Home. It was a long-term residential setting where children lived, learned basic skills, and were cared for under one roof. Over time, the property changed hands. By the mid-20th century, the school was being operated by the McElroy family. Because of this transition, you'll still hear it called Bristol Nelson, Bristol McElroy, or simply Louisa. The school stood near Highland Avenue and Greenland Drive, directly across from the old Rutherford Hospital, which served Murfreesboro for decades. And while many families believed they were doing the best they could for their children, not everything that happened here was positive. A local Murfreesboro newspaper documented a tragic incident at the Louisa School, reporting the death of a 14-year-old resident. The article states that authorities investigated the circumstances surrounding her death while the school was still operating. It's an important reminder that behind the walls of places like Louisa weren't just programs or routines. There were real children and real consequences. And even while the school was still open, people noticed something wasn't right. Many locals have shared accounts of hearing disturbing sounds coming from the school grounds, especially while stopped at the nearby traffic light. Those weren't stories told years later. They were experiences that people reported while the building was still standing and occupied. Other accounts tied to the school describe strict routines, isolation, and discipline, conditions that today would raise serious concerns. Much of what we know survives through fragmented records and community memory rather than a complete documentation. Eventually, public attitudes towards institutional care began to change. The Louisa School closed and the original building was demolished in the 90s. Years later, Rutherford Hospital across the street would also be torn down when medical services moved to a new campus. Today, Middle Tennessee State University occupies part of the former hospital property, and almost nothing remains to mark what once stood there. But places like this don't always disappear completely or quietly, not because of ghosts, but because of memory. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, this ground holds history, because the stories that matter most aren't always the ones that come back later. They're the ones that never had a voice when it mattered. Are you listening to them now?